Yeah.
You are listening to The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Andrea Spearman, and this is The Black Landscape, where we engage with emerging and established Black leaders here in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. Thanks for tuning in. Our full-length episodes have now moved to our Patreon, where you can subscribe for $5 a month. That's patreon.com/The Black Landscape. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave a 5-star review of the show and a written review. We want to hear back from you. Today's episode is sponsored by 9301 Home. More about them later. I'm your host, Andrea Spearman. I'm a light-skinned Black woman with big, light, and dark brown curly hair. Today, I'm wearing my pink glasses and a black semi-see-through shirt with red rose design throughout. Today, we're here with the man, the myth, the icon, Robert Townsend. Please describe yourself. Yes.
I am, I've got one of my vintage John Coltrane t-shirts on, Love Supreme, black,
Yes.
Black and white photo. And I've got like my hat, I got like a floppy blue hat on. It's kind of like one of those tank hats that I love. And I've got my glasses on, and my goatee has got salt and pepper in it, and I'm loving it.
Yes, we're loving it. I love it. Mr. Townsend, it's an absolute honor to be speaking with you today. I've been a huge fan of yours of your work since the 90s with, 5 Heartbeats, Meteor Man, Parenthood, all that great and wonderful work that I'm sure everyone's familiar with. But take us back to the very, very beginning. What kind of upbringing did you have? Like, were your parents creatives too?
Well, my mother was very funny, but no, I was the first to take on show business. So I grew up in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, and my mother, Chi-Town, and the west side is considered rough, and it still is rough. And when I was a kid, my mother was single parent, for a minute, so she was raising 4 kids on her own. So I had to stay inside the house. And when because there were gangs outside. And so because of that, that's when I started to fall in love with television. And so my muscles started when I was 10. That's how it started, at 10.
What happened at 10 to really kind of flex those muscles?
Because I was watching television, I watched everything. I watched there was 3 networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. Those were the 3 main networks, and PBS. And I would watch everything. I watched the PBS shows, I watched the French films, with subtitles. I was like this little kid that was devouring all this content. And then at a young age, I discovered I could do voices and characters. And so when I was 10, 11, I could do probably 40 voices easy and sound like the real people. So in my one-man show, the show starts off with me as that 10-year-old kid, and the images that I saw and all the stuff. And I understood it. Even though I was 10, I understood Shakespeare. So so it started there. It started there in Chicago. And then there was a teacher in 5th grade that really, said, "Hey, you have a gift, and I want to mentor you." And that teacher, I named my character Meteor Man Jefferson Reed after my teacher, James Reed. That was his name. So I did that. Yes. So there's little nuggets in my films where I celebrate people that have made a difference in my life.
Oh, I love that. I know that person was delighted when they learned that.
Well, he had passed away. So he had passed away. I think he died from cancer. He smoked, but he was a really beautiful man. But he was the one who first invested in Robert Townsend.
Wow. That's amazing. I love little nuggets in movies that way, and little callbacks and throwbacks to people's actual lived lives. That's such a great experience.
Thank you.
When did you first write your first script?
Uh, the first thing I ever wrote, I was, now, it's funny that you say that because, like, the first thing
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, I wrote this little short story when I was in Catholic school. I went to Weber Catholic School in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a writing teacher, and she was like, we want you to write stories. And I wrote a story called Foxhole 13. Now that you say it, it's Foxhole 13, and basically it was this soldier that was lost in a foxhole, and to on his radio to get the other guys to communicate. He said Foxhole 13, and there was an oak tree, and the only reason they could find him was that he knew that the oak tree was by this foxhole, and that was like the first thing I ever wrote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was the first thing I ever wrote. Yeah, Foxhole 13. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it. So it started there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I didn't think anything of it because as a young kid, I was in the theater at 14, a theater called XBAG, Experimental Black Actors Guild, and I was a young
Okay.
member at 14, and I was around people of color that were writers, directors, producers, but I didn't think that I would be one. I just said, I just want to act and I could perform and what have you. So that was the first thing that I wrote, and it started there. It started there.
Yes. I love folks who start in the theater because I have a little bit of theater training myself, but it's so I started loving dance a little bit more.
Oh,
um just because we were able to move our bodies a little bit more. But yeah, being on that stage and at such a young age, I'm sure that was transformative, and to have these older folks pouring into you, not knowing who you would become.
yes, yes, and yes, because um, Chuck Smith, who was one of my first directors, he now directs plays at the Goodman, and he's a staple at the Goodman Theater in Chicago. And I went back, and he just directed Joe Turner's "Come and Gone," August Wilson's play, and
Love
it
that play.
absolutely amazing. But he reminded me when I went to the show, he says, because he calls me Bobby, and he goes, Bobby, you were so young, we had to drive you home from the theater all the time. And then
Right.
you would take a bus to get there, but you were a kid in the daytime. And then by the nighttime, we would drive you home. And everybody's like, okay, I'll get Bobby home. I'll get Bobby home. And when the reviews came out for the very first play I did, they singled me out in the reviews.
Oh.
And so then my mother, she was the one who says, because, your kid, I was a different kind of kid. I love television. I love voices. I love characters. And at that opening night party of my first play, my mother says, she comes over with two glasses of punch, and she goes, "This is where you belong. This is
Oh.
where you belong." And it's kind of like she saw it like I saw it, like, okay, I'm this strange kid that loves, movies like nobody's business, and then I can do the movies and perform characters. And so, but everybody at that theater really protected me and nurtured me. And when you look at my movies now and TV shows that I've created, it all goes back to that little boy in the theater. Like what you did, let me say something about you.
Okay.
Just your breathing exercise before we started, I was like the man in the theater that started me. Clarence Taylor would always have us do these warm-ups, shoulders up, shoulders down, shoulders up. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth. So everything that you were doing, I was like, oh my God, she's like from my tribe, because there is a thing about grounding and centering yourself when
Yeah.
you're going to speak, when you're going to talk, just to, like I'm also a professor now. I'm a professor at USC, in the film department,
Yeah.
tenured. They were like, and I love what I do. And my students, I take them through warm-ups like that. And then I go, how does your voice feel after we do these warm-ups? How does your body feel? And then they go like, I feel more alive. I feel more present. I feel grounded. And so
Yeah.
when we were doing that, I was like, oh man, she's from my tribe. She gets it. She gets it. And because a lot of people like what I learned when I was at XBAG, Clarence Taylor, and I talk about this in the One Man Show. He was this tall, distinguished Black man, and he loved theater. He was a school teacher, but he wanted to be an actor. And he would always say, your body is your instrument. You must warm it up. You must, every angle, get to the theater 2 hours early. And he would just break everything down. And, a lot of artists don't understand the importance of breathing.
Enjoying this interview? For full-length episodes, become a member of the Patreon for $5 a month at patreon.com/The Black Landscape. Members have access to full episodes, exclusive merchandise, giveaways, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Subscribe to the Patreon today. Link in the caption.